And I hope that everyone can hear me because I can't see you. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me this evening. I hope you're all staying warm. It definitely feels like December today. And tonight I'm going to talk about the amazing wildlife of Cape Cod. I had originally put this presentation together for a group on the West Coast. And so I wanted to highlight species that they wouldn't necessarily see, but also I was thinking about, what brings people to Cape Cod, and certainly nature and wildlife bring lots of people here every year. And so I first wanted to just talk about WildCare really quickly, who we are, what we do. And so we are a nonprofit 501c3 organization. Our mission is to treat over 1,800 animals per year. And we have a staff of 9 and over 200 volunteers. And so you can imagine taking care of 1,800 animals every year. We could not do that with a staff of 9. So our volunteers are really critical to the work that we do. We provide all our own rehabilitation and veterinary care. We have consulting veterinarian who comes into our center as needed. And we provide over 40 programs a year typically. In the last 2 years, it's been primarily virtual programs like this, which has been great, honestly, because it's allowed us to reach a larger audience. This bird on the right on the top is an immature northern gannet. And the bird below is an immature common eider, a type of sea duck. We'll talk about them a little bit later. And so an important part of what we do at WildCare is we operate a wildlife emergency helpline. So people can call us if they find animals in distress, or if they have human-wildlife conflicts, we can try to help them with those conflicts so that they respond in a humane way. And last year we received almost 12,000 phone calls, and this year over 10,000 calls already. So those numbers, I like to share those numbers because to me, it shows the critical importance and the need for the work that we do. And by the way, this is a red-throated loon who's being released here. And where are we located? So we are located on beautiful Cape Cod. I feel so lucky to live here and to work here and have a year-round permanent position saving animals. You can see, so our facility is actually in Eastham. We're on the Orleans Rotary, but on the Eastham side of the Rotary. But importantly, you can see that we are surrounded by water living on Cape Cod. So you can imagine, we have just rich marine life. We have animals, land, air, and sea. We also have a very important structure at our facility. It is our elliptical Raptor aviary. And the reason we call it elliptical is because it is elliptical in shape. And the reason it's so cool and so important is because, first of all, it's a huge structure, the largest in the state. It allows us to house bald eagles. So birds that big, basically. But it has 3 inner chambers for housing wildlife temporarily, and then an outer chamber, which forms a continuous loop. You can see the outer chamber here on the right. And oh my goodness, I have the most sensitive computer mouse on the planet. Sorry about that. Here's a red-tailed hawk in the outer chamber, and it allows birds to be able to fly continuously. And this is very true to life for us to get them conditioned for life back out in the wild. I call it the Raptor treadmill, but we don't just keep raptors in there. We have seabirds in there, terns, hawks, owls, not all at the same time, of course. We also have seabird therapy pools, and these are so critical to the work that we do. Being surrounded by water, we see hundreds of aquatic birds every single year. And so an important part of their rehab is that they need to be waterproof 100% before they're released, but also they need to be conditioned, and we need to make sure they're diving appropriately, swimming appropriately, and we wouldn't be able to do that if we didn't have pools. So these pools are so, so, so important to our work. They're my most favorite part of WildCare. And what animals do we see at WildCare and why? So we primarily see 3 things. We see orphaned, injured, and diseased. And we see mostly wild birds, but also wild reptiles and amphibians and small mammals. The largest mammal we can accommodate is a Virginia opossum. And by the way, this is a herring gull with a fractured wing. He was released. This is a great horned owl from Orleans who was suffering from rodenticide poisoning. He was treated and released. And this brown pelican, which we don't see commonly on Cape Cod, was blown in by Hurricane Sandy in 2012. This bird had a wing injury and frostbite on its toes, actually a wing infection. And so we didn't have pools in 2012. So we started the rehab process, and then we shipped this bird on a flight to Florida to be rehabilitated in a sanctuary. So now we're ready with the pools. You can bring on the pelicans. I always say that. Of course, we don't want to get any animals, but we're ready for the pelicans if, if they need to come in. So just a couple more slides about wild care to preface my talk. And it's that we received 1,812 animals in 2020, representing 152 species. So my staff needs to know all about, 152 species. It's no small task. We tend to typically see similar species, but every once in a while you get those rarities like a brown pelican. And so it's really important. We are very well networked with other rehabilitators across the country, so we can get the answers and the assistance that we need. And obviously wildlife matters, and it matters to all of you. Otherwise you wouldn't be listening to this talk this evening. I feel super blessed to live in this place that is so rich in biodiversity. Again, on air, land, and sea. This is an American robin nest, classic nest, and this is an eastern coyote. And the reason I'm showing that is because nearly half of the animals that we see at wild care have been impacted negatively by people. So people are attracted to wildlife here on Cape Cod, but we also get in their way. And so we see a lot of human impact, cat and dog related, hit by vehicle, nest habitat disturbed. And so I just think that's a really important point to make, that there's really no such thing anymore as nature taking its course, because if you find an injured animal, it probably has been injured due to humans, not necessarily directly, but indirectly. Okay, so on to my presentation. So Cape Cod, so what brings people here and why is it so special? Well, first of all, it's absolutely stunning. We are 30 miles out to sea here on the Outer Cape. We have over 560 miles of pristine, stunning coastline. We have Cape Cod National Seashore, which is over 40 miles of protected sandy beach. It's just a beautiful place to come and play or to live, to work, definitely to stay. And it's also unique because, when you look at it from a plane, you would think, oh my God, it's all sand. They live on a sandbar. And yes, we do, but we also have these really unique and diverse habitats on this sandbar, including Atlantic white cedar swamp, which is shown here in Wellfleet. We have pitch pine and scrub oak forests, coastal dunes, maritime forests, plain ponds, grasslands, salt marshes, coastal salt ponds, and kettle ponds. Imagine that we have all these different species who inhabit those different locations. So it really is incredible. We are not just a sandbar. There's a lot of diversity here. And I love the first animals I decided to talk about is the sea turtles, because people think, oh my God, cold, it's December. How could you possibly have sea turtles on Cape Cod and in the winter? And so I'm sure you're all familiar that our stranding season is underway. And what happens is that we get turtles in the fall and winter months who are typically younger turtles, sea turtles, who they are further north in the Atlantic because they're feeding. And if they don't turn around quickly enough and move south, back to their wintering grounds, then they get trapped in our colder waters the temperatures that are dropping in the fall and winter, they get trapped in the colder waters and they become hypothermic or cold stunned, and they wash up on our beaches. This is a loggerhead who is not a healthy turtle. This is an example of a cold stunned turtle washed up on the beach at high tide and unresponsive. This is a photo from Massachusetts Wolfley Bay Wildlife Sanctuary, Mass Audubon. They organize the most incredible sea turtle stranding effort probably in all of the United States. And so here is a photo from Mass Audubon. And again, what happens is juvenile turtles that are supposed to be heading south, they might linger, and then the waters become colder and they start to slow down when it becomes 40 degrees in the water, and then they're trapped in the hook of Cape Cod. And since 1979, Mass Audubon has had this organized effort based on the tides, the winds, the water temps. They can predict where turtles are going to wash up. And so they literally have hundreds of volunteers who walk the beaches at specified times to retrieve turtles. The typical stranding season is Halloween through December. However, climate change, it's a thing. And what's happening is, like, the stranding season has just begun this year and it's already December. And that's because we are seeing a trend with warmer waters. And so, of course, if the waters are warmer longer into the year, the temperatures aren't going to drop at predictable times. And so the turtles are stranding later in the season. We have had record years also where Mass Audubon retrieves, over 1,000 turtles. It's unbelievable. And so when you think about the geography of the Cape, it makes sense that these turtles, they would be heading south. They start to slow down, the water temps reach 50, and they get into this hook and they have no place to go. So they drift and they wash ashore. So some of you might be thinking, but if the waters are warming, then why are these turtles getting cold? Why are there more strandings every single year? If you look at this chart, since 1979, when Mass Audubon has organized this stranding effort, you can see we're seeing more and more and more and more. Record year 2014, over 1,200 turtles stranded. 2020, big year. This might be a big year as well. Because what's happening is with climate change, we're also seeing not just warm water temps, but the currents have changed. Currents and storm events are more intensified. And these turtles, they're lingering, they're going farther in some cases, and then they just don't have time to get back. The temperatures start to drop. It could also be correlated with successful conservation efforts on the beaches in Mexico and Texas, where some of these sea turtles breed. So that's a good problem to have, right? We have more turtles and we have climate change, so we might have more strandings. And these are examples of the turtles that are washing up here on our coastline in the bay on Cape Cod. And so all of these turtles are endangered species. This is Massachusetts Endangered Species Act and the US Endangered Species Act. And so the Kemp's Ridley turtle is one of the smallest that we see, typically the size of a dinner plate. It's the most endangered species of sea turtle in the world. And literally hundreds strand on Cape Cod every year. And again, typically juveniles, they're not smart enough. They don't know their way and they stay here too long and the water temps drop. Loggerheads are also under endangered species. They're a threatened species, and they typically see around 25 loggerheads per year washed up, cold stun. These adults can exceed over 400 pounds, which is incredible. The green sea turtle here, and these are examples of healthy turtles, by the way. This is a turtle that looks like perhaps it was nesting. So the green turtle is also threatened. A few dozen strand every year, and adults can reach 400 pounds. And the leatherback, which is an enormous turtle as an adult, this is a little hatchling. They are an endangered species. I believe they are the only endothermic turtle which means that they can actually regulate their own body temperature to some degree. They're not cold-blooded like all the other turtles. They don't strand as often, and that's because of the endothermy. They typically strand in later months when the water is really, really cold, and they haven't made it out of here. Adults can reach over 1,500 pounds. And I wrote some notes, I think, about, because you might be asking, well, where do these turtles go? And the Kemp's Ridleys, they breed from the Gulf of Mexico along the Atlantic seaboard from Florida to New England. Let's see. I'm sorry, adults breed in the South. They do not breed in New England, it's too cold for them. And they occupy habitats in the Gulf of Mexico. The loggerhead is found worldwide. Their range in the Atlantic is from Newfoundland to Argentina. Green turtles are found worldwide. They breed on the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and Florida is an important feeding area. And then the leatherback is highly migratory, travel over 10,000 miles per year, and nests in beaches on tropical latitudes. So these turtles are coming from other places. You can find green sea turtles nesting in the Carolinas and further south. It's incredible. So they're coming here to feed, but they need to make their way back. So what happens to these cold stun turtles? So this is a green sea turtle. And what happens is Mass Audubon and the National Marine Life Center, they are doing these rescues in the field, and the turtles are then transferred to either the New England Aquarium in Boston or their nearby satellite facility or the National Marine Life Center in Buzzards Bay. Sometimes when we have these years where we have tons of turtles washing up, they're transported to facilities further south to begin that rehab process. Eventually, turtles are tagged and released, and some receive satellite tags so they can be tracked and make sure that these rehab efforts are successful. Because most sea turtles are cold-blooded, rehabilitation is a long process. It takes a long time for them to heal and recover. So it can take over a year for these animals to recover. And I think what I'll do is, if you can hold your questions, and then I'll have you at the end, we can turn our microphones on and you're welcome to ask questions directly. And I hope that I have stressed the importance of Mass Audubon and their sea turtle stranding network. It really is incredible, and they're saving, sometimes over 1,000 turtles a year. Really amazing, extraordinary effort. So my next creature that I want to talk about is the Atlantic great white shark, our most charismatic megafauna on Cape Cod. Everyone loves these guys, or everyone loves to talk about these guys. And I first have to thank my dear friend Cynthia Wiegren. She is the executive director of the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy, because she provided me with all of these slides. And I apologize, I wrote down some really cool facts, so I might be reading off of my cheat sheet here and there. But so great white sharks, to us it seems like, wow, like a new big sexy phenomenon. However, you can see this map, and all the green dots represent shark data, shark sightings from the 1800s. And so sharks are not new to Cape Cod and New England waters. They've been coming here for a really, really, really long time. And what's happened is, and I apologize for this graphic image, sharks, they've only increased in population due to conservation measures. And this was fairly recent, the happenings. So conservation measures were introduced in the 1990s to halt their massive, massive decline. Basically, between 1961 and the 70s and 80s, Atlantic white shark populations on the Atlantic had dropped about 70%, if you can imagine. And that's a decimating percentage. The populations were in decline because of a growing commercial shark fishing industry, sport hunting, unfortunately, harvesting their fins and jaws for food and also for folk medicine. Their numbers plummeted. And in 1997, a federal law was introduced banning the hunting of great white sharks. And so we now believe, thanks to the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy and all their incredible research, we believe that we have a population of about 300 great white sharks around the waters off Cape Cod. This is during spring, summer, and fall. And so there's more to this. There's an important point, so, okay, so we had lots of sharks. We knew they were here in the 1800s. Then we decimated them, literally slaughtered them. Now they're coming back. What are they eating? Why are they here? And why do we have them in such huge numbers? And so we have to talk about, if we talk about the sharks, you have to talk about the seals. So gray seals, I think they're like one of the most beautiful creatures I've ever seen. Look at this big blob. It looks like it may have had an entanglement injury at some point. Beautiful seals. We call them horse-headed seals because they have a head shaped like a horse. They're a native seal, and they've inhabited Cape Cod for over 4,000 years. They also were nearly hunted to extinction because there were bounties on them. In the early 20th century, I actually found data that said that Massachusetts paid over 15,690 seal bounties, meaning they paid 15,000 people to bring back seal heads. The population absolutely plummeted, went into the toilet. And then the state of Massachusetts had to step in with a law to protect the gray seals in 1965. In 1972, the federal government passed the U.S. Marine Mammal Protection Act. Thank God. And 1972 isn't all that long ago, you guys. It's a skip in time. So it is now, because of this Mammal Protection Act, illegal to harass, hunt, capture, collect, or kill any marine mammal, or attempt any of these actions. One more thing, it's believed there are about 450,000 gray seals between Canada and the US waters, and it's believed we have about 50,000 gray seals around our waters off Cape Cod. I think this is exciting. And why is this exciting? Because I hope I'm getting my point across, that the sharks are here to eat the seals, but both of these populations are representing a healthy ecosystem. They are rebounding. They were decimated by people, and thanks to laws that were put in place, they are actually coming back. And so to me, I see an incredible conservation success story, a healthy environment. I love this herd of seals. That's probably off South Monomoy. I don't know for certain. And so how do we know all of this information? How do we know what sharks are doing, where they are, why they're here? And that's primarily because of the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy. Their mission is to support scientific research, improve public safety, education, and inspire white shark conservation, and basically replace fear with facts. These are apex predators. They are critically important. They are actually like a sentinel species. So they tell us about the health of our environment. So we know we have a healthy Cape Cod because of the abundance of seals and sharks living here. And what else can I tell you about them? So the Shark Conservancy, what they do is they focus on white shark behavior and movements with emphasis on public safety. And so they even do some acoustic tagging where they place tags on the sharks. And there are these buoys that you can find in Pleasant Bay and also parts of our coastline on the Atlantic. There are these buoys where if the shark passes and they have an acoustic transmitter on them, if they pass within 500 yards, there's an immediate notification that's sent out. And this is important because if all of you follow Sharktivity, the shark app, some of this data is going on to that app. And so this allows basically beaches and towns to make decisions about public safety because they know those sharks are around. And it also has helped Atlantic White Shark Conservancy to understand which animals are around, how far they go, when do they come back, where do they stay, where do they hunt. All of this really, really important data, which again informs public safety management. Shark fatalities, I like to remind people, are about 1 in 11.5 million. You have a better chance of a coconut falling on your head and killing you than you do, being killed by a great white shark, even if you're out here in Cape Cod waters. Sadly, all of this became a really stark reality when we did have a fatality in 2018 off of Truro. Arthur Medici was a surfer, and he was unfortunately killed by a great white. And so we do have to be careful. These sharks are coming very close to the shore. And that does happen in other places in the world, but we have a very unique landscape here that allows them to do this. Here's the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy tagging a great white. I love all these slides that Cynthia gave me from the Shark Conservancy. I really appreciate it. Really fun and certainly important stuff. So this was just an example of sharks detected and where. I'm sure you all know, if you follow the Sharktivity app, that the sharks love Nassau Beach. They love the areas of Truro, also out around South Monomoy, typically locations where you can find seals in shallow waters. Also, you'll see many signs like this around the beaches with the through the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy, basically letting people know that there are sharks in the water. Enter the water at your own risk. And you can see here that typically the peak season for the sharks to be in our waters is in October. And if you were to look at the Sharktivity app and look at every single white shark sighting since inception of the app, this is what it would look like. Every triangle shows where a white shark has been seen. So again, if you get in the water, you absolutely can get in the water, but you have to swim at your own risk and be careful at all times. Don't go out very deep. I love this map. It's incredible. We have so much life in our waters. This is just an example of how the Shark Conservancy uses markings on the sharks to identify individuals. And this was a shark a couple of years ago that beached itself. If you remember, I can't remember where this was. I want to say it was Nassau Beach. And here's this apex predator and everyone gathering around to help it. So people were pouring water over it, trying to get it back in the water. Really incredible, incredible to see. And the Shark Conservancy, I'm super grateful for the work that they do here. Again, replacing fear with facts. They have a shark center and they do a lot of education, especially with children also, where you can go to the Shark Center and learn about the work that they do. So that was a lot about sharks, but you can't really talk about Cape Cod anymore without talking about sharks. They're such an important part of our ecosystem. So another group that I feel really proud to work with is the Center for Coastal Studies on Cape Cod and Provincetown. And they do a lot of North Atlantic right whale research, amongst many other things. And through the Center for Coastal Studies, we know, so the North Atlantic right whale is critically endangered. There are less than 400 North Atlantic right whales remaining in the world. The estimate is around 368. And most of those animals are here in the spring and winter months feeding. So if you can imagine, when you're talking a critically low population level and you have all your eggs in one basket, if we were to have an oil spill in the winter months while these animals are here, it could be absolutely devastating. They are present in Cape Cod Bay January through May, but the peak is March and April. And if you want to see right whales, put your woolies on and go out to Herring Cove or Race Point on a clear day during March or April, and you can typically see these beautiful creatures from the shore. I need to thank Jesse Meschling, who provided me with these slides and information. So Cape Cod Bay, obviously hosting, you know, nearly all of the entire population of the right whale, is obviously designated a critical habitat for right whales. So no set fishing gear can be placed between January 1st and May 15th. And February 1st and April 30th for lobster gear. And there are also vessel restrictions in place, so boat speed restrictions from March to April. Center for Coastal Studies has been observing right whales from the land and also by air since 2011. Over 50% of all the known North Atlantic right whales they have seen them here. So amazing, just incredible. So again, you can see them from shore in the winter, and they're feeding on zooplankton, which is basically copepods, these little like tiny little crustaceans. 70% of their diet in Cape Cod is made up of 3 different species of zooplankton. So in 2021, in the winter season, over 65% of the known right whales were seen here in our waters. And 13 of the surviving 16 mother calf pairs were seen. And just think about that for a second. Only 16 mother calf pairs in a critically low population. It's extremely sobering. Really, really amazing. And Jesse shared with me that in 2017, on one given day, they saw 198 North Atlantic right whales. So that's over 50% of the known population. And so I keep talking about them and, you know, and how sad it is that they're in decline, but why are they in decline? So their biggest threats, you know, historically it was whaling. Well, we're not doing any whaling anymore in the Atlantic. So their threats, their biggest threats are fishing gear entanglements, what we refer to as ghost gear, which is derelict gear from lobster traps and gill net fishing that has not been relocated. And this stuff is at the bottom of our oceans, and these animals are foraging and they swim through it and they become entangled. Vessel strikes are an enormous issue for this species, as well as climate change, which is changing the distribution of their food, hence changing their migration routes, sometimes pushing them right into high vessel traffic locations. Ocean noise is also a problem. These animals have a lot of odds against them. This was just an infographic that the Center for Coastal Studies had given me. And it shows that the whales, since 2017, there's only 42 new known calves. We also know of 50 known deceased or serious injury right whales, and 34 definitively known dead. And the causes of death are, you can see here, unknown cause, vessel strikes, and entanglements. So what's happening to prevent that and to help these animals? Well, certainly we don't have enough time to talk about it, but there are amazing groups like the Center for Coastal Studies and Whale and Dolphin Conservation that are trying to get regulations passed, you know, to limit where vessels can go and high speed restrictions and working with ghost gear retrieval. But what happens when these animals do get entangled? So I would say that the Center for Coastal Studies, they have a marine mammal entanglement response program, and I believe it is the leading marine mammal response program in the country. The work that these guys do is amazing. They are everyday heroes. They go out and they try to disentangle these stressed whales that are entangled. And they do this through a process that's called kegging, which I had only learned about when I researched this program. So you can see here, they're like on an inflatable, like a little Zodiac. They actually attach large floats to the entangled whale. And this helps the whale to become buoyant, because some of these animals, you can imagine, they've been carrying this gear, they're exhausted, they probably haven't been foraging, they're stressed, they need to come up to breathe. They can't, they're marine mammals, they can't breathe underwater. So by attaching large floats to the entangled animal, it helps them to stay on the surface, closer on the surface with less effort. And it allows these guys to work with the animal and try to disentangle them. Since 1984, Center for Coastal Studies has freed more than 200 large whales and marine mammals from gear. And that's a huge number. I wish that we didn't have that number, but I'm also grateful for the work that they do. Imagine when you have a population of less than 500 individuals, the success, the disentanglement of just one whale, and especially a female who can live to reproduce, is critically, critically important. I cannot stress it enough. And Center for Coastal Studies also works, they do aerial surveys, so they understand, they document which whales are here, when they arrive, where are they feeding, where are they going when they're here. They're working to expand mariner warnings, improve fishery regulations, and public awareness. I cannot give them enough praise. Incredible work. Okay, so we talked about sharks and whales and sea turtles. And now I'm going to switch gears to birds. So birds are one of my most favorite things on the planet, other than mice. And something that I love about Cape Cod and the Northeast is we have some species here that people don't get to really see in other parts of the world. And they're all very beautiful. So this is the common eider. It's a type of sea duck. And these ducks are largely here in the winter. We have huge populations of them here during the winter months. You can see them year round. We do have some females breeding on the Boston Harbor Islands, but typically this is an Arctic duck. They breed on our Arctic tundra, and they come here for the winter because it's balmy here compared with Arctic. This is an immature northern gannet, my most favorite species on the planet. They are a type of booby. They are our booby of the North Atlantic. They're related to pelicans, frigate birds, cormorants. And these guys breed on the islands off of Quebec and Nova Scotia, and they also come here for the winter. And so you can see them year round, but typically the huge numbers are here in the winter. And these birds are pelagic, which means they are typically found way offshore, can be 30 miles offshore. But you'll find that sometimes winds, weather, storm events will blow them into the bay, or you can see them feeding closer to shore. This beautiful bird, who looks like a football, is a surf scoter, and he's missing all of his major flight feathers. And that's because they were broken. And rather than having him for months while he molts, we, under anesthesia, we plucked the broken feathers, forcing the feathers to regrow immediately. And that worked. And this beautiful bird no longer looked like a football. He was fully feathered and he was released. We love this duck. Look at this duck's face. So this is a bird, interesting. I want to say they breed on lakes near boreal forests in the Arctic. Not what you would think of a sea duck, because their winter lifestyle is to come here and eat mussels and eat crabs and spend their winter in our cold waters. And this Atlantic puffin, Atlantic for a reason, and so you find them on the Atlantic coast, but they do not breed here. They breed in Maine and further north up to Greenland, but typically we only get them here on Cape Cod in the winter months, and they feed offshore. So when we get them at wild care, it's usually associated with a storm event. Northeast winds. Northeast winds blow in the gannets and the puffins. Oh my God, so many ducks. I'll try to speed this up, but these are the common eider again. The male, this is an immature male, and this is a female. They look very different, but both very striking. Oops. This is a white-winged Skoda, another Skoda species, breeds in, they're like in the lakes and the forests in the Arctic, such weirdos. This is a black Skoda. The best place to see them in the winter here is off of Nauset Beach. And this is a stunning, absolutely beautiful long-tailed duck. Cape Cod, well, the waters around Cape Cod and especially Nantucket Sound is home to something like 65% of the entire wintering population of long-tailed duck. This is an Arctic breeding duck. They come here for the winter. So all these ducks, you guys, you know, you think, oh my God, it's cold. I don't want to be here. There's no wildlife. There's tons of wildlife in the winter here. It's all around us in our waters. I wish I had more time. I'll have to do a duck talk. So the Atlantic puffin, we refer to them as the parrots of the sea. They have this brilliantly colored beak, which we don't get to see here because you only see that in their breeding season, and that's typically Maine or further north. They are an alcid, which means they are related to the dovekies, the guillemots, the murres, the razorbills, and they're basically little auks. They are pelagic in the winter, which means they feed offshore. Again, we only seem to see them after intense northeast storms. After a nor'easter, go to Race Point and stand out there with your binoculars or your spotting scope, and you have a good chance of spotting one. They breed in Maine on Matinicus Rock, Machias Seal Island, and Eastern Egg Rock, and they are another conservation story. I'm so excited we have them here. They're so special, but humans once again got in the way. This beautiful species was absolutely decimated by hunters earlier in the 1900s. And what happened was, you know, the puffins disappeared from the nesting areas in the Gulf of Maine. So National Audubon started what's called Project Puffin in 1973. Its goal was to restore puffins to their historic nesting islands in the Gulf of Maine. And interestingly, so puffins had nested on the island of Eastern Egg Rock in Maine until 1885, but they were slaughtered by hunters for meat and feathers. So what National Audubon did with this Project Puffin was they took young puffins from Newfoundland and they planted them in burrows on Eastern Egg Rock Island in the Gulf of Maine. And they fed those puffins, you know, they had to take care of them, obviously. And between 1973 and 1986, they transplanted 954 young puffins. While they did that, they did something else that was brilliant that has been copied all over the world for seabird restoration. They basically put puffin decoys, mirrors, and played puffin sounds throughout the island to encourage adults to land on that island. Like, look what's here. You know, they see the mirrors, they see themselves, and they think there are other puffins there. And they see the decoys. There's puffins, please come. So you have all these babies and you have all these decoys. And the young puffins that were planted there, they basically, most young birds will imprint on the location where they hatch. So what happens is they started planting puffins in 1973. It takes puffins a few years. They return back to where they hatched when they're mature enough to breed. So in 1977, all these transplanted baby puffins were now adults and they were returning to Eastern Egg Rock. Such an amazing, amazing story. In 1981, the first 4 pairs nested on the edge of the island, and the rest is history. And this is just one island. The colony has since increased to 150 pairs. Just incredible. And this is a species you're not going to see. The Atlantic puffin is an Atlantic species. You're not going to see them on the West Coast. And the reason that I'm spending so much time talking about this beautiful little bird is because I'm super excited that WildCare, you know, we do the work that we do because we love animals and we want to give them a second chance, but we also want to play a role in the bigger picture. And so we work with a researcher from the Puffin project, and whenever we get puffins or murs, he actually bans them because he bans young puffins on an island in Maine. And what he's hoping is he loves to ban our adult puffins because we're really hoping that one day one of our puffins is going to return to one of those islands, and then they're going to get a band sighting. I hope this is all making sense. I'm like so excited that I'm not really explaining it well. So he puts bands on our puffins, which have an identifiable number. It's like a fingerprint. It's unique to that bird. And so one of these days, I know when he's banding puffins out there and spotting puffins on the islands with his spotting scope, one of these days he's going to tell us that he spotted one of our puffins. And I cannot wait for that day, because it also tells us that, you know, they do survive beyond rehab, because of course we do our best and we release them, but we don't really know what happens to them once they leave our doors. So this past winter, we had this gorgeous little puffin. I think he was with us for 30 days. He was a storm bird, emaciated, weak, dehydrated, not waterproof. 30 days, we got him banded and he took off Race Point. And Anthony Hill is the bander for Project Puffin, who works with us, and I really hope that he sees some of our puffins. So what are puffin threats now? You know, just because they're not being hunted anymore doesn't mean they're out of the water, so to speak. Climate change is a huge problem for them because it is changing food availability. When you're a puffin and we have really warm water and the typical prey that they feed to their young is not available, guess what? Adult puffins have to travel farther north to find colder water to find those prey. And they might not even find those prey. And so adults are away from the nest too long. There are some years where some of the islands in Maine are a complete failure because adult puffins are feeding fish to their young that are too large for them to eat because they can't find their preferred prey. Intensified winter storms are basically beating the crap out of all the seabirds, and that is related directly to climate change. Lead and mercury poisoning from the food that they eat, fishing debris ingestion and entanglements, and obviously oil spills. Were we to have an oil spill in the Gulf of Maine, it would be absolutely devastating for this species, as well as the common murs and the razorbills, who also nest in the Gulf of Maine. I'm sorry that's so depressing, but I always have to keep it real. You know, it's like, oh, they look so cute and they're back. They've come back from population bust, but we still have an enormous amount of work to do to keep them all safe, keep them flourishing. Love this photo. Piping plovers, another super charismatic, just a beautiful, beautiful little bird, and unique to the East Coast for breeding. So the Atlantic coast population nests from Newfoundland to North Carolina, and they love Cape Cod. Piping plovers, you probably think, oh my God, you know, people either love them or hate them. And it's because there's this huge controversy around them. This gorgeous little bird, they're only here for this spring and summer, and they love the same habitats we do. They like dune-swept coastal beaches, and so do we, right? So the controversy is that these birds, you know, have been declining. We will get into why. And then what happens is all the local towns and Mass Audubon, these groups that work to protect them, they basically rope off sections of beaches, allowing these birds the space that they need to breed. And people don't like that. People don't want their beaches taken away from them, even though we're basically talking about an endangered species. Piping plovers are both state and federally threatened. We're very lucky. I think piping plovers have had 2 really good years the last 2 years. breeding on Cape Cod. They breed along the National Seashore. They breed on some of the bay beaches. They breed on the Sound, and they have really strong site fidelity. So year after year, these strongly migratory birds, they come back to the place where they nest every single year. I feel super proud that Massachusetts is home to the largest breeding population on the Atlantic coast. We have, as of last year, over 700 breeding pairs. Yeah, people will hate me. These birds are what started my career. These birds are why I do what I do, because a million years ago, I started with Mass Audubon and I was a piping plover monitor. So I can't say enough great things about piping plovers and also the work of Mass Audubon to protect them. So here's a chick. How can you not love that? It is a cotton ball with legs. And I just need to share that in 1986, there were only about 140 breeding pairs in Massachusetts. So we've come a really long way. We're not completely there. Our state goal is 900 pair. And what did I say? We have 700. We got 200 more pair to go. We need as many females as possible. We need them to have all of their babies survive in a season. They typically lay one nest a season with 4 eggs. If that nest fails, they will replace it. However, you know, when you are producing eggs, typically the clutch is smaller for the when you lay again, because the females just don't have the resources to keep producing 4 egg nests. So we need those first nests to survive and have all those chicks fledge. So why are they in decline? Well, just like everything else I've been talking about, anthropogenic sources, meaning human related sources. We are out of balance. We have, you know, we have lots of crows, we have lots of coyotes, and all of those things are wonderful, but some of those populations are out of balance because of, you know, human refuse, the availability of unnatural resources to these animals, which creates these unnatural boosts in their populations. Vehicles run over plover chicks. Climate change and loss of habitat is real. You have all seen just the changes in Nauset Beach in the past few years due to winter storms, the massive, massive rate of erosion. And so these birds, you know, we say, oh my God, we're losing our beach, but we've got endangered species who are really losing their beach. They're losing their ability to breed. Intensified storm systems, this really sucks, forgive me, for plovers. They arrive very early, usually in February, and they'll start nesting. I want to say, don't quote me, but are they here in March? By April, they're nesting. And often, you know, we get these winter storms that are brutal and wash out these birds' nests, and then they have to nest again. And as I mentioned, often that is not a success. Dogs are a huge problem. People walking dogs off leash in piping plover areas. Dogs will chase the adults. They'll keep them from the eggs. They'll keep them from the chicks. And of course, they do have natural predators too. But I always focus on how can we do better? What is the human conflict and how can we do better? So my last 2 species, these are just 2 more success stories and part of what I think makes Cape Cod even more awesome. So the osprey, a Cape Cod icon, right? Everyone loves this species and they are everywhere on Cape Cod. We have the largest breeding population of osprey in all of Massachusetts. I'm on an osprey team, a literal team with Eversource and Mass Audubon Long Pasture, Mass Audubon Wellfleet Bay, the Cape Wildlife Center, and several other team players. And I'll tell you why in a minute, but the estimate is that there's about 500 nests on Cape Cod. And why is this so exciting? It's exciting because this is another example of a species back from the brink of local extirpation. So that basically means localized extinction. These birds suffered a massive decline due to DDT in the 1950s. DDT was basically a pesticide that was being sprayed, and it was causing eggshell finning. And so what happened was when these birds would sit to incubate their eggs, the eggs would crush under their weight. And eggs can't do that. Eggs are a perfect structure, you know, so that they are rigid enough that they can be incubated, but also fragile enough that the chick can break out of them. And so when you have soft-shelled eggs, they're going to crush under the weight of these birds. This species numbers went into the toilet in the 1950s. By 1972, we finally figured it out and figured out that DDT was really causing the problem and that the species was almost gone from New England. So in the early 1900s, we had 60 to 80 pair in Massachusetts. And then we had, they started to do really well in Massachusetts. We had 1,000 breeding pairs in the 1940s. And then DDT was introduced. The population plummeted by 90%. And look at these numbers. This gives me goosebumps because it is so startling. By 1964, we only now had 11 pairs in Massachusetts. And by 1970, 1 to 2 pair of osprey on Cape Cod. I also like to use this as a reminder. You know, some people might say, oh, osprey, like, why do you want to save an osprey? They're everywhere. Who cares? Well, this is a perfect example. They weren't always everywhere. And there's no better time to study a species than when they are abundant, because we have something to learn from that. This species was once not abundant because of us. Okay, so how do we get all these birds to, how did we get them to bounce back? DDT was banned, thank God, in the 70s. And Mass Audubon, once again, they stepped in and they decided to build, because these birds weren't going to just come back by themselves, right? We only had 11 pairs and 1 to 2 pair on Cape Cod. So Mass Audubon started constructing these nest platforms, which you still see today. We have them throughout Cape Cod. And these nest platforms are basically a commanding view in appropriate habitat near water. And it's basically it encourages the bird to come and nest there. And so to this day, a large percentage of the pairs in the state are using these artificial sites since 1980. I'm so grateful to Mass Audubon for doing this. And so what happened was in 1976, 1 pair of osprey nested on the cold storage fish tower in Dennis. And this was the very last Cape Cod osprey pair. Audubon started putting up all these platforms in Cotuit and Osterville. They were inspired by similar projects in the vineyard, on the vineyard, and in Westport and Dartmouth. And initially, interestingly, osprey started arriving, but they didn't want other osprey around. Now we have so many osprey and so limited nest sites, they don't care. You can find 2 osprey nests like in view of boundaries have totally broken down. So these birds will nest not right on top of each other, but certainly within view of each other. Platforms, excuse me, and then the next group of osprey nested on radio towers on Forest Road in Chatham, and the rest is history. Sorry about my mouse, everyone. I don't know why it does this. Okay, so osprey on Cape Cod. Do they have any dangers now? Well, yes, they do. I'm happy that we have 500 pair, but they still have a lot of threats. And so their main threats are fishing debris, ingestion, and entanglements. We get quite a few osprey every year. And we do get osprey that are entangled and hanging from their nests, hanging from poles. And we do respond to those animals. And sometimes that requires the help of the local fire department and also Eversource. Electrocution is an issue. And so you can see here, there is a male. This is at Boat Meadow in Eastham just this summer. That's the female in the nest. She was on eggs, and unfortunately her male counterpart was electrocuted there. And so we do work with Eversource. We contacted Eversource, and I believe they removed that bird and they said they were going to rubber up the pole until the end of the season so that she would not be at risk. However, I think she ultimately abandoned. It's impossible for a single osprey to care for young on their own. Nest fires are a huge issue. Tornadoes. Remember the tornadoes we got in 2019? We were inundated. That was the busiest week of my entire life so far because we responded to over 11 nests for osprey chicks that were down on the ground. The nests had been blown down. Lead and mercury poisoning in the food that they eat, illegal nest removal. We deal with it all the time. And illegal shooting and lack of natural nest sites. You know, these guys used to nest in trees with a commanding view of the water. But there's a lack of natural nest sites. And so the next best thing is utility poles, especially with the double-armed crossbars. They love that. That's a perfect platform for them to nest. And I wish I had more time to talk about that because the reason we're working with Eversource is becoming proactive, working with us and other groups to determine problem nest sites, meaning nest sites where there's risk of electrocution, there's public safety risk, there's risk of fire, and when they can, they are erecting alternate platforms for the birds and placing deterrents in the nest. However, for many reasons, Eversource can't just go and put up an alternate platform. There are so many reasons why they just can't. I mean, sometimes it's private property. There are many issues, but they are working with us to determine which nests are problematic and be proactive. And they do help us during the tornadoes. We worked with the fire department. Here is the Harwich Fire Department that help us put chicks back into the nest at Bud's Go-Karts. Bud's Go-Karts was the first nest that was down from the tornadoes. So the fire department helped us. We get the chicks, we make sure they're okay, we observe them for a few days, and we get them back in the nest as soon as possible. So again, with the tornadoes, we responded to 11 nests, and I had amazing volunteers helping because most of these nests, not only did we have to get the chicks back, but also the nests had to be repaired. They had blown down. So here's Carl and Michael, two of our awesome volunteers who repaired this nest platform in Chatham, got these chicks back in the nest, and the parents, osprey parents are good parents. They take care of their young. We've even found, we've had chicks for 14 days and we place them back into the nest and the parents care for them. Also, osprey can't count. So when we get babies that are grounded, and if we can't get them back into their nest, we put them into another osprey's nest and they can't count. So they will feed that baby. And even if that baby's a little older or a little younger, it doesn't even matter. They are excellent parents and I'm so proud of them. Thank you to Eversource for their tremendous efforts. This is a chick we got from a nest fire. Unfortunately, his family perished in the fire. And Eversource actually helped us to get this bird into another nest with another family. Obviously, we have to find families with similarly aged chicks. You know, we wouldn't put this chick in a nest where their kids are about to fledge the nest. That would be a mismatch. And my last species is the bald eagle. Oh my God, another becoming a Cape Cod icon, aside from a national icon. Bald eagles are just so cool. Who could not like them? First of all, they're huge, they're stunning, very beautiful birds. And we had our first definitive nesting of bald eagles on Cape Cod this year. It was the first in 116 years. The last time there was a recorded nest on Cape Cod was 1905. So this was a big deal. And why is this so exciting? Well, because it seems like the theme of the night is that this species is back from the brink of extinction. And similar to the osprey, they suffered massive decline due to DDT in the 1950s. We finally banned DDT in 1972. And the bald eagle, whose numbers were in the toilet, was declared an endangered species in 1978. So like the osprey, we banned the DDT, but these birds, their numbers are so low. How are they going to come back? They can't come back without human intervention. And so here's where Mass Wildlife stepped in. Super proud of Mass Wildlife. 1982, they basically started taking eaglets from nests in Michigan and placing them onto nest platforms here in Massachusetts on the Quabbin Reservoir. They fed them using eagle puppets so that they would not imprint. And the goal was, like the osprey, they imprint on the location where they hatched. And once they are mature, they'll go back to that location. Well, this was a success, even more so than we thought. Between 1982 and the end of the Mass Wildlife Program in 1988, they had brought 41 bald eagle chicks from Manitoba, Nova Scotia, and Michigan to be raised on the Quabbin. In 1989, 2 pairs successfully raised young, and the pairs included Ross, which was the very first eagle, the chick that they brought to the Quabbin, which is so cool. I mean, if it can't be more successful than that. So the imprinting totally worked. The numbers started to come back. And in 2011, their status was changed in the state from endangered to threatened, and they currently are special concern. So they're doing better. So they nest in several places throughout Massachusetts, but the Quabbin and the Merrimack rivers are the most important breeding sites for them. And now Cape Cod is also on the map as a breeding site. In 2020, we had over 70 active eagle nests in Massachusetts. And today, thank God, we have over 71,000 nesting pairs across the United States. These birds were removed from the federally endangered species list in 2007. But that doesn't strip away their protections. This is a migratory species of special concern in the state. And you cannot hunt them, you can't own their feathers, you cannot harass them, you cannot move their nests. So, a lot of people get worried, oh my God, you're removing something from the endangered species list. That doesn't just mean they're being dropped. There are still many, many regulations that protect them. It just means they're doing better, thank God. I can't talk about eagles without telling you about 2 eagles we got in 2019. God, we had them at the same time as the tornadoes, if you can imagine that. I don't think we had enough raptors in our building that week. We needed a few more. So we got a call for a young eagle in Harwich exhibiting normal behavior. It was sitting on beach chairs, as you can see here on the left, and chewing on beach towels. So that is not normal. So we sent out one of our staff who was able to easily capture this bird. It was emaciated, dehydrated, covered in lice. That's a big bird. They have an enormous wingspan. One cannot appreciate it unless you have them close to you. This beautiful bird had been banded by Mass Wildlife as a chick in its nest that same summer. So we knew where this bird had come from. And ultimately, it was a skinny bird, insufficient hunter, and was basically starving to death. Had some anemia. And then a couple of days later, we got a call for a young eagle in Truro, and about half the size of the other bird. And it's interesting. So the birds in Florida, in warmer states, young birds will travel up the coastline in the fall. They don't know where they're going. They don't hunt well. And sometimes they end up here and they're starving. So Mass Wildlife believes, because this bird is half the size of our New England eagles, that this was a bird probably from Florida. Mass Wildlife banded this bird for us. And I just want you to know that they eat a whole lot of fish, and the public loves to make donations of fish when we put the call out. If we put a call out that we need help for a bald eagle, everyone responds. And taking care of these birds is no small task. They're big birds, they eat a lot, they can be dangerous to work with. And we were grateful for our large elliptical aviary where they could get some true to life flight and conditioning time. Look at these birds, massive, looking fierce. Love both of them, both stunning. So Mass Wildlife, we did a public release at Long Pasture Mass Audubon Sanctuary, and Mass Wildlife banded the other chick. Mass Wildlife was there. Wow, super excited that this event had taken place. I think we made the cover of Cape Cod Times. And we do hope with those bands on the birds, we do hope that someone recites them at some point and that we get a report so we know that they're doing well. So eagles, do they have threats? Absolutely, they do. You know, they are still a species of special concern. Their biggest threats are rodenticide poisoning, which is rat and mouse poison. They get secondary poisoning from eating carcasses that have consumed rat poison. Lead poisoning is probably their biggest threat in New England. And lead poisoning is happening because of ingestion of lead, fish hooks, jigs, sinkers, but also bald eagles in the north, when water freezes over, they switch from their fish eating lifestyle to a scavenging lifestyle. And when they eat carcasses that might have lead shot in them, they become poisoned. Mercury poisoning from the food they eat, cyanobacteria, fishing debris, entanglements and ingestion, and illegal hunting. And I think actually I'm going to skip through the snowy owl because we're at 7:14. But basically, keep an eye out because these guys are only here. They are Arctic breeders and they are only here for the winter. And they're starting to arrive now. And some hotspots are Race Point, Sandy Neck, Nauset Beach, sometimes Coast Guard Beach. When you see them, give them space. These are often these are either adults that return every year or they are young birds. They're often starving when they arrive and they need space to be able to forage. They're basically coming here either because food sources are depleted in the north or because snowy owls had a really bumper crop where they had tons of young animals. And so they can't all stay in the Arctic because they need to disperse and find food sources for the winter in other locations. So give them space. They suffer from rodenticide poisoning, illegal hunting, harassment, starvation, vehicles, power lines, you name it. Unfortunately, they are listed as vulnerable and declining. So I hope that this talk was not depressing. I hope it was inspiring. The commonality was that humans do terrible things, but they can reverse their actions and do really good things. And we've brought a lot of animals back through research and conservation efforts. We are all ambassadors. And I forgot to change the name of my slide for my last slide. Sorry about that. I had given this talk for the San Francisco Bay Bird Observatory. But anyway, this is an Atlantic puffin, and I'm super grateful that you all attended. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to stop the share, and you are welcome to unmute yourself and ask questions. Does anyone have any questions? And I see there was a comment that my slide was not changing. I think for one moment I got a message that my internet was unstable. So I think I was stuck for a second. Hope I wasn't stuck for the whole thing. Does anyone have any questions? All right, in that case, I think I will say good night. Please join us. We have Jim Sweeney next Wednesday at 6 p.m. Jim Sweeney is an awesome birder and naturalist, and he is going to talk about birding hotspots on the Outer Cape. Super great, knowledgeable guy, and I highly recommend tuning in. And thank you everyone who donated. I think we raised $100 tonight. I really appreciate it. You're welcome, Glenna. Thank you. Good night, everyone.